My Nigerian viewers recommended this next one called Blood Sisters. Femi Ademola hires a hitman named Blade to kill his younger brother, Kola, and not just on any day, but on the day of Kola's wedding. Kola leads a very successful pharmaceutical company, and to add to that, he's about to marry the very beautiful Sarah. Sarah can't be more excited. Today, her best friend Kemi helps her prepare for the wedding. Behind closed doors, however, Kola is abusive and very controlling, all because he didn't want Sarah to wear that specific dress. Toss this Temu Jonasi Gomorrah out this bitch. The guests arrive, including Sarah's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Duru. They are from a poor village and are excited to marry off their daughter. Kola's father has passed away, leaving his mother, Uduak Ademola, as the head of the family. They're so close that he even kisses his mom on the lips. Uduak favors Kola and doesn't care about her other son Femi, because he turned out to be too feminine. Suddenly, Sarah sees her ex-boyfriend Kenny trying to enter the building. She tells him to leave and not cause any trouble, but it's already too late because Kola has already noticed. Kenny begs Sarah not to marry Kola. He even screams that he still loves Sarah before the guards take him away. Furious, Uduak confronts her future daughter-in-law with a face that looks like she smelled her own fart. Then Kola confronts Sarah right after and hits her hard in the stomach. During dinner, Mr. Duru makes a toast to the family and thanks Kola for the fancy party. Then, the black sheep of the family arrives, Timian. Much to her mother's disappointment, Timian announces that she just got out of rehab. As the family's youngest, Kola adores Timian. Why is it giving Sweet Home Alabama love? Later, Sarah confides in Kemi that Kola hit her again. Kemi gets angry and tells Sarah not to marry the man or she'll end up being his punching bag for life. However, Mrs. Duru doesn't share the same sentiment. When she finds out what happened, she tells Sarah that being hit once is no big deal. She even blames Sarah for it. And because they need Kola's money for their business, she's not about to let Sarah back out of the wedding. Who needs enemies when your mother is trash? Blade takes his gun and follows Kola to kill him, but Kola fights back and successfully disarms Blade. He knows that his brother, Femi, hired the hitman to kill him. Femi is disappointed when he sees Blade being dragged out of the hotel. In addition to that, Kola tells him he knows the truth. Then Kola tells Timian that if something happens to him, she should look into Femi. Though scared, Sarah musters up the courage to tell Kola the wedding is off. It wasn't the first time he hit her, and after every apology, he still hits her. Kola is furious. Their family will be ostracized if he calls off the wedding, but Sarah is done. Seeing how she's being defiant, Kola starts choking her. This time, however, Kemi catches Kola and hits him hard in the head, but Kola refuses to stop and swears he's going to kill them both. So Kemi shoots him using the gun she found in the living room. Oh well, one less ugly man in the world. When the best man, Aiken, knocks, they pretend not to know where Kola is. Worried about the consequences, the two friends drag Kola's body to the bathroom and clean up the scene. When it's time for Kola to come into the picture, Akin tells Uduak that Kola is missing. The matriarch orders him to announce that the wedding is canceled. She's thankful that the wedding didn't happen, because now she doesn't have to deal with Sarah's poor family, and they don't have to see your RBF anymore. Sarah's parents, on the other hand, are worried about the loan that Kola promised them. Disappointed, the guests start to leave. Kemi knows they are in big trouble and have to act fast. They have to get Kola's body out of the hotel, so Kemi suggests they chop him up. After cutting off his head, Kemi realizes she can't stomach finishing the job, so they wrap up the body parts in blankets and take them out as they pretend to be members of the hotel staff. I would have chopped his microscopic thingy first. While loading the body parts into the car trunk, a photographer notices them and starts snapping photos. The two leave the hotel and dump the body in a shallow grave they dug. After getting rid of the body, Kemi tells Sarah to return to Kola's family home and pretend to be a devastated bride. But when Sarah returns, her bags are already packed. Uduak kicks her out of the house and tells her never to return. Timian tries to defend Sarah, but Uduak tells her not to get involved, so Sarah heads to Kemi's house instead. Uduak believes that Kola just needs time alone. Both Femi and Timian volunteer to take over the company while Kola's gone. Even though Timian is qualified, Femi points out that she's a baby powder sniffer and an embarrassment to the family. Timian suspects that Femi has something to do with Kola's disappearance, but she can't prove it just yet. After the wedding got called off, Mr. and Mrs. Duru immediately received a letter from the Ademola's legal team. They are going to get sued unless they pay the loans they got from the family. They keep trying to reach Sarah, but she ignores them. Kemi is at a store when a photographer named Winston approaches her. Winston was at the wedding and has snapped photos of Kemi and Sarah loading something into the back of a car. He suspects that it was the missing groom. He demands a huge amount of money for his silence, and Kemi is forced to oblige. Sarah and Kemi have decided to pay Winston. However, the big back man demands more money as soon as he gets the first payment. Without Taimyin in the way, Femi can take over and lead the company. So his wife, Yinka, tries bribing Taimyin with money and a charcuterie board of drugs. But Taimyin refuses to give in. When she confides in her mother and asks her to look into Femi, Uduak brutally shuts her down. She says Taimyin has always been useless and a disappointment. Hurt by her mother's words, Taimyin snorts some powdered donuts. Uncle B, the family's bodyguard, picks her up and takes her home. Femi has managed to get some pictures of Taimyin's escapade and immediately shows them to their mom. He says it's time to send Taimyin back to rehab. Because they know Winston will keep asking for money, Kemi suggests they just kill him. They visit Kemi's ex-boyfriend, Ibrahim, who is a drug dealer, and gets a gun from him. When Kemi hands the money to Winston, she tries to shoot him, but he grabs the gun from her, so Sarah runs over the photographer to save her friend. Unfortunately, they have left the gun and the money behind. When they get home, they find Kenny waiting for Sarah. Sarah apologizes when she finds out that Uncle B beat up Kenny. Femi finally takes over as CEO, but a few days later, dogs dig the shallow grave, and Kola's body is found. The news spread to social media, and Inspector Joe Obasanjo is assigned to the case. He delivers the devastating news to the family that Kola was murdered. Femi identifies the body afterward, and his wife is extremely happy, thinking it was God's divine intervention that killed Kola. Joe quickly questions people and immediately finds his way to Kemi and Sarah. Sarah admits that she and Kola argued, but she explains that they fixed the problem before Kola left her room. So Kenny is arrested instead. He caused a scene at the hotel and has a motive to kill Kola. When Sarah finds out that Kenny is arrested, she tells Kemi they should confess to the crime, but Kemi assures her that Kenny will be released soon. That's when Sarah admits that she told Kenny the truth. She was losing her mind and had to tell someone. Kemi is beyond shock at her friend's stupidity, but isn't too shocked because Sarah's wig was laced with lead and it seeped into her brain. Knowing that the police will soon look for them, the two best friends decide to run away. Joe was part of the Chicago PD for 20 years and is excellent at his job. He knows that Kenny is not the killer. When he finally gets the CCTV footage of the hotel, he and his team head to Kemi's house to make the arrest. But it's already too late because the two women have left. Now that they're fugitives, Kemi and Sarah have tossed their wigs and hide in the Nigerian slums. Kola's funeral is packed with people, but Taimyin isn't there because she's in rehab, dealing with her own mess. Uduak is not satisfied with the police work, so she bribes the superintendent and urges him to find Sarah and Kemi as soon as possible. The minister consoles Uduak for the death of their son, but Uduak reminds him that Kola lived as an Adamola and should be remembered as one. Mr. Duru is greatly affected by the crime Sarah committed, and one day he suffers a stroke. Him being big-backed didn't help either. Kenny has helped Sarah and Kemi hide in the slums. Now he assures them that they will cross the border the next day and start a new life. Kemi calls Akin to confess to the crime. She explains that she shot Kola because he was beating up Sarah. Though angry, Akin relays the confession to Joe. Unfortunately, Uncle B has managed to find the women's location. They fight back and disarm him before setting him on fire and making their escape. But Uncle Bitch survives and immediately reports to Uduak that the two women got away. Meanwhile, Kenny is caught at a checkpoint, so he throws away Kemi's and Sarah's passports. With no Kenny and no passports, the middleman refuses to take the two women over the border. So Kemi steals a car and heads to her grandmother's house. Kemi has also stolen Uncle B's gun and a phone they found in the car. After getting some bribes, the superintendent orders his men that the Kola murder case will be prioritized over any other case. Inspector Joe has received some footage from the hotel, and he sees a familiar face in it, Blade. Blade is a known criminal, and he suspects Blade was there for a hit. But the superintendent tells him only Kemi and Sarah will be considered suspects. Before they reach their location, Kemi and Sarah's car breaks down. Early morning the next day, Kemi gets rid of the gun she stole. While walking, a doctor and a female companion offer to give them a ride. Joe pays Blade a visit and questions him, but Blade feigns ignorance and continues to play cool. When Joe asks Femi if he knows Blade, Femi pulls a Kiki Palmer and says sorry to this man, but he doesn't know him. Kemi and Sarah are officially labeled as criminals. Sarah reaches out to her parents and tells them what really happened that tragic night. Mrs. Duru apologizes for not believing her daughter. Then she tells Sarah to evade the police the best she can because she doesn't want to lose her. After that, Sarah calls Kenny. After getting the location, Kenny hits the road to meet Sarah, unaware that he's being followed. Kemi and Sarah are very comfortable with their new friends. So when the doctor offers them a room that night, they gladly accept. The female companion, however, says she'll return the next day to see them. The two ladies are unaware that the doctor hands his friend a huge amount of money. Then he offers Sarah some liquor while Kemi is in the shower. When Sarah loses consciousness, he drags her body into another room. The doctor removes Sarah's clothes and marks something on her body in preparation to harvest her organs. Then he goes to Kemi's room and she gets sliced on the thigh and gets punched into next week. Once Kenny arrives at Sarah's pin location, the doctor slices his throat and drags him inside. But Kemi knocks his ahs out cold. When Kemi checks on Sarah, she is unconscious, and to her horror finds a pair of kidneys in a cooler. Kemi carries the unconscious Sarah into Kenny's car while Uncle B tails them to Kemi's grandmother's house. Unfortunately for Femi, him managing the business isn't going too well. He has 4 million vaccines in a warehouse with no buyer thanks to RFK Jr.'s vaccine scare tactics. His wife Yinka worries for Femi's connection to Blade, but he calms her down by putting his small personal blade inside of her. Wanting to know the truth, Akin asks Kola's ex-girlfriend, Princess, if Kola was ever violent to her. Princess refuses to say anything at first. Then she shows what's underneath her eye patch. Akin is shocked that Kola could be capable of such a thing. Meanwhile, Taimyin wakes up screaming from a nightmare, and a linebacker in the rehab center is over her night terrors, so she beats Taimyin up. In self-defense, Taimyin stabs her neck fat, and Taimyin gets taken away to the prayer room. The next day, Joe questions Taimyin, and she basically admits that Femi probably killed Kola. Then she begs Joe to help her leave rehab. Femi can't catch a break as Blade is now blackmailing him for money. When he brings him the money, he threatens Blade with a gun, but isn't brave enough to shoot. Yinka brings in their bodyguard Tunde to shoot Blade dead. Never bring a blade to a gunfight. Femi feels undermined by Yinka, and she calls him pathetic. This leads to some passionate time as this seems to be their kink. Sarah and Kemi continue their drive to Kemi's grandmother's house, but Kemi is in a lot of pain with her sliced leg. Sarah makes an emergency stop at a village where she begs for their help. A village woman brings them in, and she helps with Kemi's wounds. Meanwhile, Joe has discovered Blade's body and goes to his superior that he thinks Femi is behind both Kola's and Blade's murder. He says even if Sarah and Kemi did kill Kola, it was in self-defense because Kola's an abuser. Afterwards, Joe arrives at Femi's house and accuses him of killing Blade, but everyone there feigns ignorance. He gets reprimanded the next day for harassing the family. Once Kemi is all healed up, she tells Sarah that Kenny had died trying to save them, and Sarah is devastated because Kenny is the type of D that you put a ring on. Later, Akin stumbles upon all the paintings that were done of Sarah, showing how she was abused by Kola. So he calls Kemi saying he believes everything. He brings all of the drawings to Joe as proof that the girls were just defending themselves. But unfortunately, Joe was kicked off the case. Taimyin comes up with a plan to escape the rehab center by seducing the big back bodyguard and stealing his keys. She successfully does so and interrupts the family dinner by revealing Femi's plan to kill Kola. Uduak is furious with Femi and throws dishes at him. Taimyin comforts her mother, but Uduak says a druggie like her isn't getting any part of the company. Once Sarah and Kemi arrive at Kemi's grandma's, she comforts Kemi. Unfortunately, Kemi already plans to leave soon, in fear that they might come after her grandmother too. A huge squad is already on their way over with Uncle B, and the pair are arrested. Meanwhile, Uduak gathers the family and wants Femi to kill the girls to prove himself. Taimyin calls Joe and asks him to come over before it's too late. Once the two girls are in front of the family, Uduak orders Femi to kill them, but he hesitates. Sarah decides to tell the full truth about Kola's abusive streak and says it was all self-defense. Uncle B decides to take the gun from Femi, but just as he's about to shoot, Taimyin says she wants to do it to avenge her brother. When Uncle B turns his back, Taimyin shoots him instead and points the gun at Uduak. It's revealed that Taimyin has known that Uduak killed her father and Kola wasn't actually his. Taimyin's father found out Uduak was cheating, so Uduak had her own husband killed. Taimyin admits she only started getting high to drown out the truth. She commands Yinka to uncuff the girls, and so the two girls run away. Joe catches the girls and says he can help them make a solid defense in court. So they agree to go with him as they're tired of running. Suddenly, they hear gunshots and Joe rushes to find that Taimyin had shot Femi and Yinka. As she points the gun at her own mother, Joe tries to calm her down, and the show ends. This was just season 1 of Blood Sisters. What did you guys think of this one? It definitely had my blood pressure high, and I feel like if the sisters had just admitted to self-defense in the first place, we may not have had to watch a full season.
Did y'all like that one? Honey, well, make sure you like and leave us a comment. I try to respond to as many as I can. And if you like Tubi, Lifetime, or just straight up trifling movies, make sure you subscribe for real. For more videos, you can click here or here.